Most of us think of our nationality as this permanent, unshakable part of who we are. It's as fundamental as your own name, right? But what if I told you that for some people, that bond can actually be broken? We're going to dive into exactly how and why a state can literally strip someone of their nationality. So let's just jump right in with a big question. Is your nationality permanent? I mean, really think about it. For most of us, the answer feels like a no-brainer. Of course it is. It's the passport in your drawer, the country you call home. Well, here's the surprising part. Legally speaking, it's actually way more fragile than you'd think. It's not a permanent right. It's a legal status. And that means under certain conditions, it can be taken away. Okay, so how on earth does that even happen? How can this bond be broken? Well, it turns out states have two really different ways of doing this, and understanding the difference between them is absolutely key. Here's probably the best way to wrap your head around it. Your nationality, it isn't some guaranteed permanent entitlement. It's much more like a legal bond, almost like a contract between you and the state. And, just like any other contract, there are terms and conditions and clauses for breaking it. So, those two ways this bond can be broken come down to two words: loss and deprivation. Now, I know they might sound kind of similar, but trust me, in the legal and political world, they are miles apart. So let's get into what that really means. And you can really see the massive difference right here. On one side, you've got loss of nationality. This is basically an automatic thing. It just happens as a legal consequence of something you did. But on the other side, deprivation is totally different. That's a deliberate, active decision by the state to punish someone by ripping up their citizenship. All right, so what kind of actions are we actually talking about here? What could lead to either of these outcomes? Let's dig into the specific reasons a state might end someone's citizenship, and we'll start with the more straightforward one: loss. Yeah, so the reasons for an automatic loss are usually pretty administrative, not super dramatic. For example, let's say you voluntarily become a citizen of another country, one that doesn't allow for dual nationality. Poof, your original citizenship could just be automatically lost. Or maybe you live abroad for decades and just never bother to renew your passport or maintain any ties. In cases like that, your citizenship can just lapse. See? It's a consequence, not a punishment. Deprivation, though, that is a whole other story. We're talking about something way more serious. This isn't about forgetting to fill out some paperwork. This is about the state actively deciding you are no longer welcome. And the reasons for it are pretty intense. We're talking about serious stuff, like committing fraud, lying on your naturalization application, or concealing really important facts. It could also be for major national security offenses, or even for acts that the state sees as a sign of disloyalty, like serving in a hostile army. And that fraud one is especially interesting, because the legal argument a state makes is pretty powerful. They basically say that since the citizenship was obtained through a lie, it was never lawfully granted in the first place. So in their eyes, they're not really taking something away, they're just correcting the record on something that was never valid to begin with. Okay, this brings us to a really fascinating and honestly a kind of counterintuitive point, and that's the strange role that dual nationality, having more than one citizenship, plays in all of this. It's a classic double-edged sword. And let's be clear, having dual nationality is awesome. It's becoming super common and it offers amazing benefits, right? The freedom to live and work and travel in multiple countries. For millions of people, it is a massive advantage. But, and here's the crazy part, it can also create this unique vulnerability. That second passport can actually make you more likely to be deprived of one of your citizenships. And the reason why is complicated, and it's all tied up in international law. So here's the logic. The big rule in international law is that you should avoid making people stateless at all costs. I mean, being a citizen of nowhere is a terrible situation. So governments figure if they target someone who is a dual national, they can strip them of one citizenship, and the person isn't left stateless. They still have that other nationality to fall back on. It's like a legal loophole. And all of this really pushes us into the bigger picture. The whole global legal landscape and the huge, often heated controversies that surround this immense power that states have. So there's no single world government that hands out citizenship, obviously, but international law does try to put up some guardrails. The most important principles are, again, trying to avoid making anyone stateless. They also push for due process, so you get a fair shot. And crucially, you should have the right to challenge the decision in a court of law. But at the end of the day, this really says it all. For all the international guidelines, the final say, the real power, still rests with the individual state. The state decides who belongs and who doesn't. So you can see why this is so incredibly controversial, right? It just opens up this whole can of worms about justice and fairness. Should a state be able to get around its own criminal justice system? Is it really fair to have one set of rules for single nationality citizens and another for dual nationals? And is it okay for one country to basically make its problems another country's problems? And all of that leaves us with one final, really big question to think about. We started this whole thing by talking about nationality as a kind of legal contract. So if that's what it is, what does it actually mean to be in breach of that contract? And maybe more importantly, who gets to decide when that breach is so bad it's unforgivable?